IVM.
Hi, I'm Satyajit.
Hi, I'm Rachita.
Welcome to Paperback by the Open Library Project.
We have as our guest today Padmini Vaidyanathan. Padmini is a creative head and editor at Vitamin Stree. In the first half of the episode, we discuss Manufacturing Consent by Herman and Chomsky, her role at Vitamin Stree, and media's role in documenting stories.
In the second half, we discuss Invisible Woman by Criado Perez and Everybody Loves a Good Drought by P. Sainath. Happy listening.
In countries where the power is in the hands of state bureaucracy, the monopolistic control over the media, supplemented by official censorship, makes it clear that the media serve the ends of a dominant elite. It is much more difficult to see a propaganda system at work where the media are private and formal censorship is absent. This is especially true where the media actively compete, periodically attack and expose corporate and governmental malfeasance and aggressively portray themselves as spokesmen for free speech and general community interest. What is not evident and remains undiscussed in the media is the limited nature of such critiques, as well as the huge inequality in the command of resources and its effect both on access to private media system and on its behavior and performance.
Thank you, Padmini Vaidyanathan. That was an extract from the book Manufacturing Consent by Edward Herman and Noam Chomsky. We'll be right back after this to discuss the book in more detail.
How many times have you motivated yourself to improve your sleep, or lose weight, or be more productive? How many times have you failed? Hi, my name is Ashton Doctor. Tune into my show, The Habit Coach Podcast, where we focus on creating small, tiny habits to improve your life instead of those big, impossible tasks. So make listening to me a habit every Monday, Wednesday and Friday on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com or on your favorite podcasting app.
Welcome to Paperback by the Open Library Project. I am your co-host Satyajit, otherwise known as Onion Knight in most food circles. I'm hosting this podcast with my co-founder at the Open Library Project, Rachita Sharma.
Hi guys, my name is Rachita. I'm an ex-banker, social impact entrepreneur, podcaster, writer, publisher, and inveterate learner. The Open Library Project is a curated library service offered to corporates on a subscription basis. The idea here is to create value, build a knowledge community, and encourage a growth mindset amongst our members.
Today we have with us on the show Padmini Vaidyanathan. Padmini is the editor and creative head at Vitamin Stree. Welcome to the show, Padmini.
Hi guys,
Thank you.
have you here. So happy to be here.
And it's a great choice of books.
Really, I feel like a nerd, a bit of a dog.
We love nerds.
You're in the right company then.
Yeah.
So before we get into the book and the extract that you read, tell us a little bit about Vitamin Stree and how did you land up working there?
Yeah, so Vitamin Stree is a digital platform, video-first platform which for young women. So we are in the business of trying to reshape the narrative for young women in India. Okay. So we want to talk about topics that are usually not talked about or are talked about from a very Western perspective.
Right.
And we want to kind of Indianize that and see, okay, what is it that women are going through in India? So whether it's something like pubes, which is, by the way, most watched video, or if it's on menstrual cups, whether to use it or not use it, whether it's on climate change in women, whether it is on the pay gap, whether it's sports, esports. We cover like a wide range of topics. But the idea is to talk about topics that are generally considered taboo topics and also start conversations, because we believe that you can't you can't basically tell someone that this is right or this is wrong. You have to explain to them and you need to have a conversation with them to understand why something is working or something is the way it is. So for us, it is about talking to women, but also hopefully talking to men or people who are on like the fence and sitting and they're just watching and they don't know how they feel about it.
Right.
So the whole idea is to create dialogues and start dialogues. And that's what we've been doing now for the last 2.5 years, at least trying to.
Yeah.
So we're one of the few kind of online videos. We don't have too many trolls and we're always surprised by that. I'm like, "Arey, itna sab kuch bol diya, troll
That is
nahi mila."
surprising, yeah. Wow.
we don't.
Oh, wow.
So we have a very good community, and that is very heartening to see, because you see that the dialogue is happening,
Right.
That women are talking amongst themselves. So when we put out something on, say, dating and love, and we talk about women empowerment through that, we see it's so heartening to see young girls come and say, oh, you know what, I feel like this,
Right.
and I don't have anyone to talk about. So these are women who are kind of like, they know because they're already online and they're consuming a lot of content,
Right.
but they also have questions. And then you're kind of sitting in a patriarchal society, and you're sitting in a society where you're not supposed to talk about it. So
Yeah.
Vitamin Stree is like that friend who's kind of
Right.
a bit millennial, Gen Z, cool, and
So
we
does
like,
Vitamin Stree have anything to say about Kabir Singh, the movie?
oh
that
my
just
God,
came
don't
out?
even get us started. I think the girls did not work for a whole day because we just spent ranting
Trauma.
about it. Like, we didn't see it.
Yeah.
But whatever we'd heard
I
about
saw it and I was only like fuming through the movie because I just wanted to see the movie to criticize it, because I was just like, the most bizarre concepts were used of, unconditional love equating to you can slap each other, and the most ridiculous thoughts according to me. But yeah.
But as
that
long as a
was-
man does it, it's fine.
Yeah.
On the other hand, when Lipstick Under My Burqa is released, it goes under through, it basically
Censorship.
was, censorship,
Yeah.
because they said it was too, just talking
Provocative
about
or whatever they said. I don't
women's
know.
sexual needs. It's too provocative. I was like, really?
Ridiculous.
So, yeah.
So what's your background? How did you get into working with Vitamin Stree?
So I worked for the longest time as a journalist,
Okay.
television journalist, guilty. And I worked with some of the names that you don't want to be associated with or not very popular. No, but I grew up in the newsroom. My first job was actually as a reporter with NDTV. And then after spending some time doing the newsrooms, I decided it was time to kind of see what else is there. I love storytelling. I love content creating. I got a chance to work with Going to School, which creates content for young children in rural areas.
Okay.
And I did about 4 years there. Almost. And we created content for kids in Bihar, in Jharkhand, in Karnataka and Maharashtra. We created a news show called the Children's Scrappy News Service.
Nice.
Yeah, which
Nice.
went on Colors eventually. And we
Oh,
had
wow.
all these kid reporters and anchors asking all these audacious questions to
Oh,
adults.
it was kids. Wow, fantastic. Yeah.
and
Wow.
so
Great.
yeah, and then once I finished that, I was I just found Vitamin Stree, and here I am, and it seemed like a perfect fit. It seemed, the conversations that they're having are very on point.
Right.
It's very well researched. It's backed by data, backed
Yeah.
by research, because we understand that you can't just say things for the sake of saying it without having something to kind of back it up and explain why something is the way it is.
Yeah.
And I think that was very interesting, and it's been a good journey so far.
Yeah, it's great. It's great that, such topics are being spoken about, and even the Me Too movement that was there. It's a step towards the right direction. So it's very heartening to know that there are people who are actually, working extensively in this domain. So that's
Thank you.
power to you.
Yay.
So getting into the book that we're going to talk about.
God, now I'm scared.
So tell us a little bit about this book and why it sort of stands out for you, and how did you find it? How did you come by this book?
College.
Okay.
I think Herman and Chomsky are kind of compulsory reading if you're into content creating and
Right.
news and media. It is at least in the, I was in college in 2002. The book came out in 1988.
Okay.
So, this is considered the Bible if you really want to understand about how machineries and propaganda works.
Right.
So that's how I first came across it. And I don't think I really understood a lot of it when I read it in college, because
Right.
a lot of it is theory, a lot of it is also based in examples from America,
Right.
which is not really,
Relatable to
yeah,
us.
at that
Yeah.
point
Yeah,
was
yeah,
not.
yeah.
And also at the point that when I read it first, there weren't too many, media hadn't exploded the way it has right now at
Yeah.
this point.
Yeah.
I read it again when I did my master's.
Okay.
And that's when it started. By this time, I'd worked a little bit in the news industry. And then I came back to India and I was again working in news industry. And that's when a lot of these things started kind of making sense.
Yeah.
And I think it's been a learning, and you keep it's one of those books that you keep going back to just to see, okay, has something changed or not changed, or, is it still applicable? And 2019, how many years later, 40 years later, it's still like so relevant, right?
Yeah. And you get like a different perspective every time you go back. Correct. Because you're looking at it from a different,
lens,
problem point of view.
Yeah, and also it's amazing as to how much the media, especially the news landscape in India, has kind of formulated and molded itself on the American news media. Exactly, right? I mean, and all of it now makes more sense because you see it, and he talks about the pyramid of propaganda, or the 5 filters of propaganda, and each one of them, if you go through it, it is so applicable to everything we do. I mean, all of us as content creators, we are trying to make money at the end of the day, right? I mean, it's great, we want to talk about things we love, but if it's not making money, who's going to pay the bill?
How long can you talk about it?
Exactly. At some point, no one's going to pay attention to you.
But what I like is that he's the book is putting emphasis on the fact that there is a responsibility attached to being from the media, because you've been given this power. So the way you use it is very, very important, and it can actually have a very positive as well as very negative effect on the masses. So I think the entire rage about even Kabir Singh was this, that, you're sort of promoting something and showing it as your hero,
basically the normalizing of abnormal behavior.
Exactly. Correct. So that's...
Given the context of the movie, which was a mass movie, you're telling the masses that, hey, you can do this propaganda. And it's fine. Yeah,
right. It's very irresponsible
Correct.
also.
So playing to the lowest common denominator and even what the director or some of the actors, some of their comments were so flippant. Like, it's so irresponsible. The director was absolutely, you cannot go on TV and say that. That's not cool at all.
Yeah.
And
Go ahead.
No, and I think also what's interesting is, and also maybe from the paragraph that I read, that often it becomes harder to understand how these theories are being given to us, or how we are being kind of brainwashed with this. Manipulated. If you don't know how the whole system behind it works. Like, why does, in an ideal world, a script like Kabir Singh should not even get funding, right? But the fact that it got funding, that it got like a big name to star in it, and that it made so much money in box office, kind of makes you sit up and how does that happen?
And there are people who think this is worth making money from, or like it's a idea worth even promoting, which is ridiculous.
In fact, we had Sucharita Tyagi on the show, who's a she's amazing, right?
She's amazing.
And basically she was like, I was uncomfortable sitting in that theater because the crowds were like roaring for the wrong things.
Absolutely.
She was like, I actually feared like sitting over there when she was sitting over there, and some of, like, if you go to G7 and you attend a movie there, it is like this. That's how the masses are reacting to these movies, and it's
by masses we mean men, huh? So this is and I'm sorry, I know you're here.
The big mass of men.
It's fine.
But it's convenient for them, right? It's convenient to your dominant population that is going to go and watch this movie.
Right.
I mean, even if in tier 1 cities it didn't do so well, maybe if you go to your PVRs it wasn't doing well, or maybe it did, I don't know. But definitely if you go to tier 2 cities, it is going to do well, because there it's still this, right? It's still this notion that you can go, and reminded me of 90s, 80s
Definitely.
and 90s.
80s, 90s movies.
And the striking bit is, like, if you see, for polio, what the country has done is basically they've taken a superstar like Amitabh Bachchan and, made sure that he's in the ad in a way to promote it, that each and every person takes their child for a polio vaccination. So you understand the importance that is attached to an actor and, the impact it can have on society. And then on the other hand, you're showing an actor do all of these things, which basically is like, go ahead, have a good time. Pick up some ice and pour it wherever you feel like, whenever, and just the most ridiculous things that were shown in the movie. But I just feel that, just tell me, how does Vitamin Stree, ensure that you'll have this authenticity attached to a topic? and you're most responsible when you're sending out a message?
So I think the first thing that we do is we acknowledge our privilege on a daily basis.
Right.
We understand where we come from. I know that I'm sitting here. I work in a city like Mumbai. I speak English. I have access to internet. I am an empowered woman. I've been educated.
Yeah.
I know I'm privileged.
Yeah.
So the first thing that we need to do, we do as a team constantly, is to acknowledge our privilege and then start from there.
Yeah.
And it especially gets difficult for things where we are not the experts ourselves. For example, when we did a video on intersectionality and feminism, and we had to, I knew, I was like, I can't talk about it. I can talk about women's empowerment, but I cannot talk about intersectionality because I have never experienced that.
Yeah.
I can get all the data that is there and put it out there, but that experience which also Vitamin Stree brings in at times doesn't exist. So for each of the intersections that we covered, we actually went to somebody from that particular marginalized community, asked them for the approval on the script if they were okay with it, and we actually got them to voice it. Because there we realized that that's not that it has to be their voice. It can't always be my voice.
Yeah.
Similarly, we're doing now one, we kind of creating one on the trans bill. And even though, again, like we researched and we wrote it, but it went to somebody who's from the community, who's a lawyer, who understands it better and had more perspective to add, so that we don't get anything wrong when we are saying that.
Right. And that's brilliant, because it's very, very important to, make sure that it's not just the content you're putting out there, it's how it's going to be received also. So
I think if your content is so cutting edge or like on the edge of, what do you say,
provoking
progress,
people at all times.
It's more important that you're responsible in your, because then you just get attacked, and then if you are able to back it up, then the trolls have nothing to say, like, which is coherent. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, the great thing about Vitamin Stree is also we also have men in the team, by the way, who have an equal say sometimes. But we listen to them, because often, we kind of take things for granted also. And there are different perceptions and different arguments as to whether we should be explaining to them or not. I mean, I know there is a dominant theory of, if you want to learn about something, you educate yourself first and then you come to me. But I believe that's not going to lead to a change, and I don't think that's going to always lead to a dialogue. And if it's a dialogue and a real change that you need, that's something that you say something and then you sit about it and you think about it, and I also sit about it and think about it, and that has to be a dialogue. It can't be a fight or a shouting match that we see in our primetime debates.
All the rules that were made for women were made by men earlier. So now I feel like, books or the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, or books like Half the Sky, where, Nicholas Kristof and his wife are talking about equality. They're talking about it together, which is amazing that, man and women are like, they're getting together to give you an entire new perspective on feminism. So it's not just, women taking a stand and, proving themselves right. It has to be an initiative by the men too. And I think these couples are really trying to do that, which is amazing. And that's great that you have, a balanced perspective at Vitamin Stree too.
I mean, feminism is for everyone, right? It's for men, women, no, irrespective of your gender, caste, sexuality, religion, region. So, I mean, we need to kind of keep that. And I think that's where it helps to have men on your side.
Right.
Because they are still the more powerful ones. So if they kind of see eye to eye, then it's not such a bad thing.
Yeah.
There are times that we don't.
Right.
But we also choose, I think it's, maybe it's like an unsaid rule, but I think we know that everyone in the room in Vitamin Stree has to agree upon a point. Right? So that if I have to go and defend something, I'm able to, and so are you.
Yeah.
Right.
Otherwise, then that means there is a problem with what we are saying. Then we kind of go back to the table and see, okay, how do we say this differently so that all of us can agree and all of us can kind of put this out and be proud of what we're putting out.
That's great.
Fantastic. On that note, we're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back after this.
Hey everybody, welcome to another awesome week on the IVM Podcast Network. If you aren't following us on social media, why aren't you? Please do. It's very important. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Would also like to thank our sponsors, Storytel and Intel. I also just wanted to add a brief note to our listeners. We've recently changed some of our show's hosting platforms, and if you're having any issues with your subscriptions, please do resubscribe to the shows and everything should work fine from there. We have a little bit of an announcement to make. Our Kannada podcast Thala Harate turns 50 episodes old this week. Alok Prasanna Kumar and Saryu Natarajan of the Ganatantra podcast joined Pawan for a 3-episode special as they discussed the CAA, NRC, and the freedom to protest in episodes 50, 51, and 52. So if you speak Kannada, why aren't you listening to that show? Also on Cyrus Says this week, Cyrus is joined by stand-up comedian and winner of the Mrs. India Earth pageant, Deepa Javeri. They talk about what goes behind the scenes at a beauty contest, how she entered comedy at a late stage in life, and how her family views her career choices. On Advertising is Dead, Varun sits down with longtime friend, photographer, and filmmaker Avinash Jay Singh. They talk about Avinash's process while on shoots, how he likes working with smaller teams if possible, and how advertising has changed for filmmakers and photographers in this internet age. On Pulyabazi, Pranay and Saurabh are joined by Kushal Bhagia, CEO of First Check. They take a look at the world of venture capital and discuss how a VC firm works. On 9XM Soundcast, Eva is joined by composer duo Salim and Suleiman. They talk about how to produce a great Bollywood score and their upcoming projects. On Simplified, Chuck, Shriketh and Tony continue with part 3 of the 2019 recap. Join them as they talk about climate activism, China and India's political landscapes. On The Habit Coach, Ashton talks about how we as a society have lessened twisting and turning of our spine as a whole and why it's important to do so. On Litnama, Lakshmi is joined by spoken word poet Jackie Thakkar, who talks about the expanding scene of spoken word today, the impact it creates, and the monetization required for these new art forms. On Hedges and Sludges, host DJ Ashwin and Varun talk about the India vs Sri Lanka match in Guwahati, 4-day test matches, the Cricinfo Cricketer of the Year, Hardik Pandya's engagement, and a whole lot more. On What a Player, Siddharth and Mikhail run down their sports predictions for this year, that is 2020. Listen in for educated predictions in the world of cricket, tennis, football, and darts. And with that, let's get you back to your show.
Invisible Women is the story of what happens when we forget to account for half of humanity. It is an exposure of how the gender data gap harms women when life proceeds more or less as normal.
Thank you, Padmini. That was an extract from the book Invisible Women, and the author is Caroline Criado Perez. And a great book to talk about. We've in fact touched on this similar topic while discussing other books as well, which deals with inclusivity of women in decision-making scenarios, right? So tell us a little bit about how did you find this book? Did someone gift it to you? Or?
No, okay. It's actually extremely interesting. I was doing some research for something I was writing. Mm-hmm. And I came across this bit of information where there was a study conducted in the United States a couple of years back, where they basically tested, these voice assistant technology, Siri.
Right.
So they did a bunch of them. And basically what they did was they asked them if, so there were two things they asked. One was that what happens when you give a prompt like I'm having a heart attack or I feel suicidal, and immediately these tech assistants will kind of give you like a bunch of numbers you can dial, helplines and websites you can go to. But if you say I'm being raped or I have been physically abused by my domestic partner, the response was, I'm sorry, what was that?
Right.
And this was a couple of years back. So when we saw, when I read it, immediately I went into the team and I was like, let's check. And it was exactly that. It was mostly like, can I Google this for you? Sorry, do you want me to look this up for you?
What's rape?
What's rape? What's that now? And so and I traced the data back to Caroline Perez, who's just this incredible, she's written this incredible book, which is just showing data in every aspect, how it ignores women, whether it's technology, whether it's how buildings are designed, whether it's why office temperature is kind of it's how it's always freezing for women. It's because it's been designed keeping in mind a 40-year-old man who weighs 70 kilos. So I mean, so there are these things, but there are also bigger things, like for example how your default for everything, even physiologically, is a man. So even your heart attack symptoms are there because the study has mostly been conducted on men, or that your crash test dummies are all the bodies of men, not women. So I mean, there are thousands of these examples just to show that nothing really works for you, and even and most recently somebody I know was in an Uber cab where the driver misbehaved with her, and there's a panic button there that you can, the emergency SOS button. So she pressed that and the call went to the driver. So we were like, even there, the technology is not like, I was like, how is it going
how did it go to the driver? That's insane.
Exactly. So then the good thing is because we created a bit of a stink about it on Twitter. So Uber has kind of woken up and they're re-looking at this. And even with voice tech assistants, because of the data that was presented then to these companies, they're kind of looking at it and trying to say, okay, how do we change it? But the thing is, it's so pervasive. Yeah. And it is so normal, and it is what I as a woman won't even have known, because this is what we live with. This is our normal. This is
and that's the constant loop, right? Like if you're not going to have decision makers who are women, then everything that you're testing, everything that's coming out in the market is basically based on the expertise of maybe 50 men, and it has nothing to do with a female perspective.
Absolutely.
And things which are not natural to them, it's never going to cross their mind. So
Silicon Valley is the best example of it where there's absolutely no inclusivity, and that's why all our algorithms are biased towards men now. That's in fact in Sarah Waterbetter's book. Can't pronounce her name really well.
Even here, I think they've given the example of Sheryl Sandberg,
right.
where it took her, a top executive, to get pregnant for the company to figure out, because she could not park. Her legs were swollen. She was having difficulty walking. Yeah. So they had to, and her parking spot was somewhere far away, and most women were parking far away. Right. They had to introduce a pregnancy parking right next to the lift so that they don't have to walk a lot.
Too much, right.
But it took somebody at that level to get pregnant for the company, which had never thought about it before.
Right.
And the thing is, you can't really blame anyone. We've all grown up in the system, so it's not even a man's fault that it is this way, not at least in this generation, because this is what we've all learned.
Right. It's just we need to kind of equalize opportunity. That's what the kind of thinking is, that because that there wasn't equal opportunity for men and women for the longest time. That's why there's no representation of women right now, because we are skewed still towards a male-dominant workforce.
Yeah, correct.
So the challenge is that how do you do it right? And is it addressed in this book?
It is. I think she says that in her introduction also, that, while there is, it's kind of scary after a point of how many things we are left out of. Yeah. But also it's good that this data is now coming out, because it's now going to people who are willing to reconsider and willing to look at it. Right. The thing is also that for women to get equal opportunities, it's not equal opportunities in this existing world. It basically means you're kind of changing the status quo, which basically means this world might change, which basically means that men also need to get a little uncomfortable, and getting that across is what is going to be a challenge. Right. And when data like this comes out, and when it's at least even in things which, there's data which is kind of just annoying and irritating and is not really like life-threatening, but then there's also data which is life-threatening. So depending on how the changes happen and when it happens and where it happens, it can definitely happen, because now you have it here in proof, and there are a lot of women who are talking about it, and it's also not the first time it's been spoken about. It's just the first time that you're actually giving numbers, right? And numbody can numbers a fact. You can't deny a fact. So
I also love what the Bangalore airport has done, and they've added a baby changing room in the men's toilet
section,
so which is amazing, because why was that not designed earlier? Is because that was not considered their responsibility, right? So
it was the hunter-gatherer provider theory, right? Man is the hunter, woman is the provider, which is not always...
It's not the case now, anyway.
Yeah, it's just like the woman is doing multiple roles now.
That's true.
She's hunting and providing and
gathering, and
pacifying,
chilling. And like, karo. Equality, karo.
Like lions, right? Now the lion chills, the woman goes and she prays.
Oh,
it's the lioness who does all the work. So
men have to chill in the future. Is that what?
No. We're saying that if you're going back to primitive, that's what you'll do.
But even just like listening, it often helps. And sometimes, we get very, women also get very angry, like especially some, if we are empowered and we know what we're talking about. And it's important to listen. And like as a woman, I feel it's important to listen to minorities. Like, for example, if it's a friend or a colleague who's from the LGBTQI community, for example, they're also not represented here. Trans people are not represented here. So it's important to listen to them, because we don't have the same experiences, and diversity and inclusivity is not a bad word. It's a good word. As is feminism. So these are good words, and these can apply to a larger change that hopefully, maybe, I don't know if we'll see it when we are alive, but maybe in
the great
we
thing.
can hope for us.
We can hope for another 100 years or so. Yeah.
Great. So the next book that we're moving on to is Everybody Loves a Good Drought, and it's by P. Sainath.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about this book.
Oh my God, such a depressing book. No, but it's, I mean, again, I think it's one of those books that kind of become a compulsory reading for you if you're a journalist, because it was written at a time, I think he went on the journey in 93, 94 is when he went on this trip across the poorest states in India at that point. And this was right after liberalization, right? And, he talks about, he goes and, I mean, especially the first half of the book, there's a bit of there's a sense of amusement also that, you're supposed to be, this is 93, and he's we're supposed to be all progressive and whatever, but here is the reality of what it is. Right. And it's also kind of an eye-opener, because for a lot of us who read it, or we probably never knew these people who are featured in these stories. We don't know what those lives are like. Yeah. And for me, it still remains relevant because I have worked in rural areas extensively. I spent 4 years of my life working in those areas. And you see that despite all the progress, despite the coming of technology and internet and everything else, and all these fabulous policies that governments after governments, introduce, it is still the same. Right. The situation hasn't changed. The farmer is still struggling. The girl child in the rural area is still struggling. Yeah. And then to come back to mainstream media and see that there's hardly any representation of that. There are no stories. I don't think there's a rural affairs editor anymore. I know P. Sainath was the last one. He was there till 2015 in Hindu. Yeah. I don't think most media publications don't have that. Yeah. And also to a great extent, it's because these are the mainstream media publications don't have that, because they're controlled by they're driven by certain numbers and TRPs, which comes back to kind of Chomsky, also saying what you're driven by.
Interests.
Correct.
And we saw the female feticide rate is so high. There have been no girls that are
born in
Uttarakhand and Uttarakhand, like the North Belt, in over 2 years, which is not practically possible. Right. So clearly the issue is still very much persistent and existing.
I mean, even if you just look at the education statistics, it is still bad. Yeah. I mean, when I worked in Bihar, I worked with government schools in Bihar, and the kind of dropout rates that you see is insane. I mean, at this age, in 2019, girls should not be dropping out of school once they hit high school. They still are. Yeah. And if they're not, and they're enrolled for whatever reasons, because they're getting some kind of a financial benefit, or they're getting a cycle, which a lot of state governments offer, it is still only for a certain period of time, which comes back to the invisible labor of women, because the first one to bear the brunt of anything that happens in a family is a girl. Right. So if the mother has another child, if the mother has to go and work in the field, it's the daughter who's going to drop out of school and come and look after the younger children in the household.
Or she has to go fill water at 4:00, so she can't be at school because she needs to get water for the house. Correct. So that they can cook. And it's just so many problems that, even if you get schools there and you get medical facilities, they are either so far that, they cannot reach daily and, access that kind of information or knowledge that's available for them. Or it's just, these multiple reasons why they have to drop out, because, the father puts pressure, or they have to get married, or all of those things. So I still feel like, there is that last end to the loop is still missing.
Absolutely. And I think he also talks about the class divide, which is also there, which we kind of, again, it's so easy to ignore. Maybe living in Mumbai, it's not that easy to ignore, because it kind of stares you in the face all the time. Yeah. But it gets even starker when you move into rural areas. You've not stopped hearing about khap panchayats or about
untouchables.
Correct. You're not. Or even, Dalits being killed for doing something.
Lynchings. Mob lynching.
There
were videos on Facebook of this is ridiculous. What kind of, for all our progress, if this is accepted in states and those guys were allowed to run for
elections.
Yeah. It's unbelievable things that happen. So, I work with a lot of farmers closely in Maharashtra. And so, while dealing with the complexities of it's a very complex problem, because it's not that the technology is not available anymore, or it's not that we can't make that change. It's just that mindset is not changing in the rural areas. There's a lot of work being done on it also by both sides of people who want it to change and people who don't want it to change. And it's just not moving ahead, because I can only talk in context to onion farming, is that the technology has been available for a decade or more, where you can just uplift everyone and it can be done. But there are political interests that will not let it happen, because these are the vote banks.
Correct. Yeah.
I know for a fact that the only reason onion prices are up because the onions have been hoarded.
Correct.
And it's so complex. When you start to, even if you go and deal with the farmer, right, that's not the solution.
Right.
Because it's not in his hands. His livelihood is pretty much in the hands of the traders or the onion mafia, which is unbelievable that it's still going on.
The bureaucracy, the red tapeism, it doesn't go anywhere. And I think you see it is so sad that despite everything, when every time elections come across and you have all these election pundits sitting on television and analyzing, they're still analyzing on the basis of caste. This is a Lingayat heavy area and this leader is popular in that caste and he's likely to win. I mean, it's sad. There is no other way that you're not going to talk about development. You might talk about, they introduce a couple of policies, but that will never be the mainstay. And I think and the fact that he wrote about this in 93 and it's still to 2019 and most of it is still relevant. I think he talks about how one tribe, I think in Jharkhand, then Bihar, or Madhya Pradesh.
Not too sure on geography.
One tribe in an unnamed state basically got left out of what they were promised in terms of by the government, because the name was spelled in the schedule that was in the document that came out. The name was not right. It was basically it had an A and a U issue, and neither the tribal community nor the officers sitting there were willing to budge. I mean, that's red tapeism and bureaucracy. So then nobody gets anything out of it.
At least we learned something from the British Raj, which was divide and rule.
Correct.
I think, which is working really well for the Indian government, but I would not want to say more on that.
But again, I mean, even in this, at the end of the day, the ones who are always left bearing the brunt are women and children.
Yeah.
So, it kind of, all these books kind of tie into how the marginalized communities or the minorities or the ones that don't have the power are always at the receiving end. So whether it's climate change, whether it's economic policies, whether it's violence, it will always be the minorities. Not that women are in minority at all. We are half the world, but still.
But they are the minority decision makers. So it still becomes a minority.
Great. So tell us where we can find Vitamin Stree online.
Go to our YouTube channel, Vitamin Stree. Just type Vitamin Stree in YouTube and just click on the first channel that you see. Like, share, subscribe. And and follow us on Instagram and like, share and subscribe.
Great. It was great having you on the show, Padmini.
Thank you so much. It was great fun.
And a big thank you to all our listeners. You can follow the Open Library Project on LinkedIn, Instagram and Facebook for latest updates on our events. And stay tuned for the next Paperback podcast on IVM Podcasts. Happy reading. You can follow IVM Podcast on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at IVM Podcasts. Listen to Paperback on the IVM Podcast app, website or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Look! Up in the internet! It's a meme! No! It's a cat video! No! It's the Geek Fruit Podcast!
That's right, we interrupt this riveting broadcast to tell you about our show, The Geek Fruit Podcast, where Tejas, Dinkar and I, Jishnu, talk about everything in pop culture, including DC, Marvel, Star Wars, Netflix, and everything in between.
You know how your friends hate it when you ramble about some nerdy crap and you just want somebody to listen to you? Well, sorry, there's nothing we can do about that, but come listen to us ramble and it'll almost be like the real thing. Kind of.
Listen to new episodes of the Geek Fruit Podcast every Monday and the Geek Fruit Bulletin every Thursday on iTunes, Google Podcasts, the IVM app, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Happy listening, you nerds.
Are you looking for India's most awesome cricket podcast? Are you now tired of listening to the same old guys drone on about cricket everywhere? Edges and Sledges is a weekly cricket podcast hosted by three fans of the game, Varun, DJ, and myself, Ashwin. It was established in early 2018, has over 60 episodes now, and is of course now proud to be on the IVM Podcast Network. Each week, we get together from three different time zones, the USA, the UK, and Singapore, and we talk about things from the world of cricket, with a focus on Indian cricket. We often interview special guests from all around the world, including former cricketers and cricket media personalities. So check out Edges and Sledges, the cricket podcast, now on the IVM network.